This game received almost unanimously perfect reviews, but I have some dissenting opinions that will humble the game a little bit. To give a vague rundown of what I think, this is a wonderful game that allows endless exploration, but at the cost of featuring some restrictive mechanics. I will say that this review contains mild spoilers, so please skip to the end if you want to hear my final thoughts on the game without any spoilers at hand. Now that warning is out of the way, I would like to say that I did enjoy this game. Just because I had some problems with it doesn't mean I disliked it as a whole. I honestly thought it was an enjoyable experience and a beautiful introduction to the Nintendo Switch's library. Before you dislike this video for feeling differently than I do, please listen to my points because I really do believe this is a good game, and even more so, a strong installment to the Zelda series as a whole. First off, I think the story as a whole fell a bit flat. But as an open world game, Breath of the Wild is truly a huge step for Nintendo in that they're venturing out to new territories with not just new characters, but existing IPs. Breath of the Wild took a huge step away from the Ocarina of Time formula that's proven successful for many Zelda titles since then. Risking the integrity of such a sacred series like Zelda is a huge move and definitely deserves a lot of respect. I really can't put enough emphasis on how big this is to try to mess with a series that's as big as Zelda. But just to touch on what the Ocarina formula is, it's the process of entering a dungeon, obtaining the dungeon item, and using that item for the remainder of the dungeon to complete puzzles and then the boss. You will be rewarded with heart containers, and throughout your journey, you'll find various heart pieces that promote exploration. Breath of the Wild breaks free from this pattern and is Nintendo's first real attempt since the late 90s to venture into new grounds. Breaking away definitely has its pros and cons within itself, but the biggest pro is that it made this adventure feel fresh and exciting, and I think that's truly what the biggest selling point of this game boiled down to. A new adventure. One of the more prominent flaws within Breath of the Wild is the lack of character development amongst the entire cast. The plot is fairly top-heavy in the sense that it seems promising at the beginning before sending you off into a journey that ends up having little direction or plot-centric cutscenes until the end of the game. Yes, there are little memories scattered throughout the game, but it doesn't allow you to get to know the characters in a way that provides an emotional connection or any desire to see the characters overcome their trials. Naturally, you know that there is our hero, Link. Ganon has Zelda, Link defeats Ganon, and Zelda is saved by Link. Just because this is the seemingly natural order of things, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't prefer to meet these characters and have a reason to like or even dislike them before the game is approaching its end. The most reoccurring problem I had throughout the game was the deteriorating weaponry. I understand that in some games it makes sense to have a limited amount of weapons, but it's usually guarded by a limited number of total inventory slots and not hard locked at a total number of swords, shields, or bows. Most of the time, you would find a strong enemy in this game who would require you to burn all of your current weapons to defeat them, only to have to fight another enemy of equal or greater strength soon after. The problem here is now that instead of progressing naturally, you have to find enemies and take their weapons. This isn't a huge problem at first, but it then creates a vicious cycle for the remainder of the game. Towards the early to mid game, every time I saw an enemy, I chose not to fight it, only to preserve my weapons. A main selling point for the Zelda series has been engaging combat and overcoming puzzles to defeat each enemy. However, in Breath of the Wild, it's almost incentivized to not engage the enemy as to preserve each individual item. I do think Breath of the Wild has a beautiful soundtrack, but only when the game allows you to listen to it. A lot of exploration takes out the music and replaces it with a few ambient piano keys that makes this open world feel empty. Having exciting tracks can help make exploring possess a stronger sense of wonder, but surging alongside an empty soundtrack makes the world seem abandoned. Other Zelda games had tracks that provided an incredible magical sense of adventure, while this game only seemed to strip it down to near silence throughout the journeying process. The overall FPS also became a problem throughout the game. Breath of the Wild is a visual masterpiece, however, the beauty comes at the expense of occasional frame drops that honestly cripples the effect of some moments. There isn't too much to note on this, but the game would have been a lot stronger objectively if it remained at a steady frame rate throughout the entirety of the game. For me, traveling in this game was initially boring and ultimately mindless, but after you have located enough shrines, the fast travel makes the whole game a lot more enjoyable. During the first 20 hours of gameplay, Roughly 15 of those were simply exploration, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on the player. After beating the main story, I started enjoying simple exploration a lot more via fast travel. Even though some of my previous points have seemed more or less negative, I really did enjoy this game. After initially learning that it was a Zelda game unlike any other, I was very hesitant to see what would happen when you couldn't map items to buttons, not have a truly linear path, and honestly, just a game with British Zelda.
All that we can hope is that the species will be strong enough to prosper on its own.
Never will I say that Breath of the Wild is a bad game, but I confidently think that it could have been much stronger and left a much larger emotional impact on the player. This game didn't necessarily feel rushed, but it felt like certain aspects went overlooked. Breath of the Wild already has an incredible resume of reviews, but I think Nintendo invested too much in the scenery and unexpectedly large sense of exploration. All in all, this game was a bold statement from Nintendo showcasing what they're truly capable of. Breath of the Wild is honestly an incredible transition into the new era of what is now the Nintendo Switch. Despite what I call the shortcomings, I truly think Breath of the Wild is simply breathtaking. As much as I do think people are overlooking the flaws, I definitely understand why people are hyped about this game. It's wonderful, it's inventive, it's new. Never have we seen Link doing things like you can do in this game. I plan on making a lot of content for this game simply because there's so much to do. I seem to be one of the few people who had slight problems with the game, but if you ask me if you should get it, I would still tell you yes. It's a very enjoyable experience from start to finish. Even though the game fell short through its story, I think the biggest flaw was that it didn't focus on the story. If the game set out to make a beautiful world, it did exactly that. I would have preferred more, but the game left me hours on hours just to finish the game. And if you went through the whole game just to finish it, I don't think that's going to be a bad game. I really enjoyed Breath of the Wild, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say. So leave a comment, leave a like, and hey, you know what? Post it to Facebook, tell all your friends that not everyone thinks it's a perfect game. Don't do that, because that would warrant more dislikes, actually. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll make more Breath of the Wild soon, and I will not point out its flaws every video, so thank you for watching. I love you all. I don't know how to end this video because I've been fairly negative. Zelda Bud.